Football is the world's game. It crosses borders, breaks language barriers, and unites billions of people in a shared passion that no other sport has ever matched. The FIFA World Cup is the pinnacle of that passion, the single most watched sporting event on the planet, eclipsing the Olympics in global viewership, stopping wars, and creating moments of pure human joy that echo across generations. But behind the spectacle, behind the golden trophy and the roaring stadiums, there is another story. A story of bribery, corruption, human suffering, political manipulation, and an institution that spent decades operating as if it were accountable to no one. This is that story. The Fédération Internationale de Football Association was founded in Paris on May 21, 1904, with just 7 founding nations: France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland. The English Football Association, the oldest in the world, initially refused to join FIFA, viewing it as unnecessary. From the very beginning, FIFA's relationship with power, prestige, and control was complicated. It took until 1930 for the first World Cup to be held in Uruguay, which had won back-to-back Olympic football gold medals and offered to cover all travel and accommodation costs for visiting teams. 13 nations competed. The tournament worked. The world noticed. For decades, FIFA functioned as a relatively modest administrative body, growing its membership and managing international competition. But the arrival of João Havelange as FIFA president in 1974 changed everything. Havelange, a Brazilian lawyer and businessman, was the first non-European to lead FIFA, and he did so by making an explicit bargain with African and Asian football federations. He would expand the World Cup to include more of their teams, and in return, they would give him the votes he needed to win the presidency. This political calculation fundamentally reshaped what FIFA was and what it would become. Havelange stayed in office for 24 years, transforming FIFA from a small Swiss nonprofit into a multi-billion-dollar commercial empire. But as it would later emerge, that empire was built on rotten foundations. In 2013, FIFA's own ethics committee revealed that Havelange, along with former Brazilian Football Confederation president Ricardo Teixeira and former South American Confederation head Nicolas Leaz, had accepted illegal payments totaling millions of dollars from a sports marketing company called ISL between 1992 and the year 2000. These were not allegations. They were confirmed findings by FIFA's own investigators. Havelange was forced to resign as FIFA honorary president. He had been the man who built modern FIFA, and he had been taking bribes throughout much of his tenure. The corruption was not an anomaly. It was, apparently, the culture. Havelange's successor, Sepp Blatter, took office in 1998 and would hold it for 17 years. Blatter was an even more politically adept operator, maintaining his power by cultivating alliances with football federations in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. He was re-elected 4 times, in 2002, 2007, 2011, and 2015, and during his tenure, FIFA's revenues exploded. The organization generated approximately $5.7 billion in total revenues between 2011 and 2014 alone, with around 70% of that income coming from the sale of television and marketing rights to a single tournament, the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. FIFA had become one of the most lucrative sports bodies in history, and the people inside it, investigators would later discover, had been helping themselves to that wealth for a very long time. The full scale of the corruption became impossible to ignore on the morning of May 27, 2015. Swiss police descended on the 5-star Bauer Olac Hotel in Zurich, where several top FIFA officials were staying ahead of the organization's annual Congress. In a move coordinated with the U.S. Department of Justice, 7 senior FIFA officials were arrested in their hotel rooms and taken into custody. Within hours, the DOJ unsealed a 47-count, 164-page criminal indictment charging those 7 officials with having collectively received approximately $150 million in bribes over a period of more than 20 years. The charges spanned racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. The DOJ alleged that 2 generations of soccer officials had turned FIFA into a corrupt enterprise. Richard Weber, chief of the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit, captured the moment with characteristic bluntness. "This really is the World Cup of fraud," he said, "and today we are issuing FIFA a red card." Among those implicated were FIFA vice presidents Jeffrey Webb and Eugenio Figueiredo, and Jack Warner, the former president of CONCACAF, the confederation governing football in North and Central America and the Caribbean. Warner had already become notorious in football circles for alleged misconduct. One key informant who helped unravel the entire scheme was Chuck Blazer, another former CONCACAF executive who himself had been caught evading taxes on millions of dollars in undeclared income. Sepp Blatter himself was not among the arrested officials in Zurich, and he actually won re-election as FIFA president just 4 days after the arrests, an act of institutional defiance that stunned observers around the world. But the investigation was closing in. In October 2015, Blatter was suspended by FIFA's own ethics committee, and in December of that year, the committee banned him from all football-related activities for 8 years, later reduced to 6 on appeal. He was additionally fined 1 million Swiss francs in 2021 after a separate probe into bonus payments. The man who had run FIFA for 17 years, the man who had insisted the organization was clean, ended his career disgraced and banned from the sport he had controlled. But the corruption scandal had a twin, and in many ways its moral dimensions were even more troubling. The question of how Russia won the right to host the 2018 World Cup and how Qatar won the right to host the 2022 World Cup had been circling football like a storm for years before the arrests in Zurich. Both tournaments were awarded in a single vote on December 2, 2010. Russia and Qatar won. England, the United States, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and others lost. The result prompted immediate suspicion. In 2014, FIFA appointed a former United States federal prosecutor named Michael Garcia to conduct an independent investigation into the bidding process. Garcia spent months interviewing witnesses and reviewing documents and submitted a 430-page report. FIFA then appointed a German judge named Hans-Joachim Eckert to summarize Garcia's findings. The summary he released cleared both Russia and Qatar of wrongdoing. Garcia responded almost immediately, stating publicly that the summary contained materially incomplete and erroneous representations of his actual findings. He resigned from his role as FIFA's ethics investigator. FIFA refused to release the full 430-page report, citing legal reasons. The full Garcia report was not made public in its entirety for years, and its suppression became one of the most damaging moments in FIFA's already battered credibility. A whistleblower named Phaedra Al-Majid, who had worked as media officer for the Qatari bid team, came forward in 2011 and alleged that Qatar had paid approximately $1.5 million to 3 African football officials to secure their votes. All 3 denied the allegations. Al-Majid later retracted her claims and subsequently stated she had been coerced into making that retraction. Separately, investigative reporting by a major British newspaper in 2014 claimed to have obtained documents including emails, letters, and bank transfer records suggesting that a Qatari official named Mohammed bin Hammam had paid more than $5 million to football officials in support of the Qatari bid. Bin Hammam denied wrongdoing. Qatar denied wrongdoing. And yet the evidence trail, the allegations, the whistleblowers, the internal FIFA documents never entirely went away. FIFA's own independent investigation ultimately cleared Qatar, but by then the organization's ability to credibly investigate itself had been fundamentally undermined by everything that had already been exposed. And then there was the human cost. When Qatar was awarded the 2022 World Cup, the Emirate was a country with no football tradition, soaring summer temperatures that made outdoor athletic competition genuinely dangerous, and a labor system that human rights organizations had long described as analogous to modern slavery. The kafala system, as it is known, tied migrant workers to their employers in ways that severely restricted their freedom of movement and their ability to leave a job or even leave the country without their sponsor's permission. Workers who came to Qatar from Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Kenya, the Philippines, and other nations were sometimes presented with contracts that paid less than what they had been promised. Many had their passports confiscated by their employers. Many were denied wages for months at a time. Workers who protested non-payment risked arrest and deportation. A Kenyan blogger who anonymously documented labor abuses was detained by Qatari authorities. Amnesty International documented workers being forced to sign false statements confirming they had received wages they had not actually been paid. Qatar's own government and FIFA both acknowledged the death toll of migrant workers directly linked to World Cup construction projects as approximately 3 people. But this figure has been widely disputed and is broadly regarded as a significant undercount. Qatar categorized deaths from cardiac arrest and respiratory failure occurring in extreme heat as non-work related, which excluded a vast number of fatalities from official tallies. Qatar did eventually introduce labor reforms. By 2021, it had abolished exit permits for most workers, introduced a minimum wage, and signed a technical cooperation agreement with the International Labor Organization. The ILO acknowledged these as significant steps and described Qatar's minimum wage as the first non-discriminatory minimum wage in the Gulf region. But a Human Rights Watch report published in 2025 concluded that Qatar's hosting of the 2022 World Cup had left a legacy of widespread migrant labor abuses, including thousands of unexplained deaths, rampant wage theft, and exorbitant recruitment fees, and that both Qatar and FIFA had failed to compensate the workers who made the tournament possible. Abusive elements of the kafala system, the report noted, remained intact in practice even where they had been abolished on paper. And the question now haunts football again, because FIFA has awarded the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia, another Gulf state with a kafala system in place, a country whose migrant worker abuses have been extensively documented by human rights organizations, and a country whose broader human rights record has drawn sustained international condemnation. Even Sepp Blatter, not exactly a man with clean hands, publicly stated that awarding the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia went against the human rights values that FIFA claims to uphold. The Building and Woodworkers Union filed a complaint with the International Labor Organization against Saudi Arabia before the hosting decision was even finalized. The pattern, critics argue, is repeating itself. Underneath all of these specific scandals runs a structural question that has never been satisfactorily answered. What is FIFA actually for? Officially, it's a non-profit association registered under Swiss law dedicated to the development of football around the world. But FIFA controlled revenues of approximately $1 billion per year, held assets close to $3 billion, and maintained reserves exceeding $1.5 billion, and yet operated with almost no external oversight, no transparency about how funds were allocated, and no meaningful accountability for the officials who ran it. Its non-profit status was its greatest paradox. It generated billions from the world's most popular sport and classified itself as a charity. The money did not go to shareholders, but the 2015 scandal confirmed it had long flowed to a small group of officials who treated the organization's finances as a personal enrichment mechanism. Gianni Infantino, who was elected FIFA's 9th president in February 2016 after Blatter's fall and has since been re-elected twice, has pursued his tenure with even greater commercial ambition. In 2017, within his first year as president, Infantino pushed through the decision to expand the World Cup from 32 to 48 teams, effective from 2026. More teams means more matches, more broadcast windows, more sponsorship activations, and substantially more revenue. FIFA projected approximately $3.9 billion from broadcasting rights alone for the 2026 tournament, roughly a 30% increase over 2022. UEFA President Alexander Ceferin called the expansion unnecessary, arguing it would fill the tournament with useless games. FIFPro, the Global Players Union, stated the calendar was already unsustainable and that the expanded tournament would push elite players to their physical limits. Top players including Thibaut Courtois and Rodri spoke publicly about the pressure on players. Critics pointed out that the jump to 48 teams came just after one cycle at 32, a notably faster pace of expansion than anything seen in previous decades, and that revenue, not sporting quality, was clearly the driving force. The 2026 World Cup itself, the first 48-team edition, hosted jointly by the United States, Canada, and Mexico, has already generated its own fresh wave of controversy. Dynamic ticket pricing pushed seats to the final at MetLife Stadium to as high as $11,000 each, drawing condemnation from fans, politicians, and players alike, and prompting investigations by multiple United States attorneys general. FIFA President Infantino responded by telling fans they should chill. Mandatory hydration breaks, introduced in response to extreme heat concerns at some American venues, were used by broadcasters to air commercials, generating widespread mockery and criticism. A Somali referee was denied entry into the United States, creating a diplomatic incident. A travel ban affecting citizens of 39 countries, including World Cup participating nations Haiti, Iran, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, effectively prevented most ordinary fans from those nations from attending their own team's matches. Environmental groups projected the expanded tournament to generate a carbon footprint estimated at the equivalent of approximately 7.8 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, more than double what was reported for the 2022 Qatar tournament. Italy, a four-time world champion, ranked 12th in the world at the time of qualifying, failed to qualify for the third consecutive World Cup. And the debate over whether an expanded 48-team format delivers better football than a leaner 32-team edition continues to be argued on back pages and in broadcast studios around the world with no settled answer. So what do we make of all of this? FIFA is an organization that gave the world the most beautiful sporting spectacle in human history. The World Cup has produced moments of transcendence that no other competition can match. Pelé weeping with joy in 1970, Diego Maradona both sublime and scandalous in 1986, Roger Milla dancing at corner flags in 1990, a young Ronaldo erupting in joy in 2002, Zinedine Zidane's inexplicable act of self-destruction in a Berlin final in 2006, the shock of Germany 7, Brazil 1 in 2014, and the breathtaking drama across Qatar 2022 that reminded billions of people why they love this game. The World Cup is real. Its power is real. The joy it generates is real. But FIFA is also an organization that allowed corruption to run unchecked for decades across two generations of leadership. It awarded its most prestigious tournament connected to allegations of bribed votes that were never fully resolved. It awarded a World Cup to a country where more than 6,000 migrant workers died building the infrastructure, without demanding a single binding human rights protection before signing the contract. It classified itself as a non-profit while enabling officials to extract hundreds of millions of dollars in personal enrichment. It suppressed its own independent ethics investigation when the findings became inconvenient. And when the United States Department of Justice finally did what FIFA's own governance structures had failed to do for 24 years, the American legal framework actually required prosecutors to classify FIFA itself as a victim because the law had no mechanism for charging an institution that had enabled and protected the very corruption it was supposedly there to prevent. The reforms introduced after 2015 were real, but incomplete. Term limits, separation of governance and management, new audit and compliance structures, these were genuine changes. But the fundamental tension at the heart of FIBA has never been resolved. An organization with no meaningful external regulator, generating billions in revenue from a monopoly on the world's most popular sport, governed by hundreds of national associations whose votes can be cultivated through financial distributions and political promises, will always be vulnerable to the same patterns of behavior that brought it to its knees a decade ago. Football deserves better. The workers who built the stadiums in Qatar deserved better. The fans priced out of a tournament that exists because of their love for the game deserved transparency. The national teams who missed a World Cup deserved a system driven purely by sporting merit. And the game itself, the game that Jules Rimet imagined could unite the world when he created the World Cup in 1930, deserves a governing body worthy of its beauty. FIFA is not beyond saving, but saving it requires something that has always been in short supply in Zurich: honesty. Honesty about what went wrong, who benefited, who was harmed, and what real accountability looks like when the most powerful sporting organization in the world operates in the shadows. The beautiful game was never the problem. The problem was always the people who decided they owned it.